Let's continue our reading of the novel today on this Wednesday, very snowy Wednesday again. We're going to begin on page 91. Follow along. We're going to read 14 pages today. That's quite a bit, but we're going to push our way through. Monday, 26 July, 1943. Dear Kitty, nothing but tumult and uproar yesterday. We are still very head up about it all. You might really ask, does a day go by without some excitement? We had the first warning siren while we were at breakfast, but we don't give a hoot about that. It only means that the planes are crossing the coast. After breakfast, I went and lay down for an hour as I had a bad headache, and then I went downstairs. It was about 2 o'clock. Margot had finished her office work at 2:30. She had not packed her things together when the sirens began to wail, so upstairs I went again with her. It was high time, for he had not been upstairs 5 minutes when they began shooting hard, so much so that we went and stood in the passage. And yes, the house rumbled and shook, and down came the bombs. I clasped my escape bag close to me, more because I wanted to have something to hold than with an idea of escaping, because there's nowhere we can go. If ever we come to the extremity of fleeing from here, the street would be just as dangerous as an air raid. This one subsided after half an hour, but the activity in the house increased. Peter came down from his lookout post in the attic. Dussel was in the main office. Mrs. Von Don felt safe in the private office. Mr. Von Don had been watching from the loft, and we on the little landing dispersed ourselves too. I went upstairs to see rising above the harbor the column of smoke Mr. Von Don had told us about. Before long, you could smell burning, and outside it looked as if a thick mist hung everywhere. Although such a big fire is not a pleasant sight, luckily for us it was all over, and we went about our respective tasks. That evening at dinner, another air raid alarm. It was a nice meal, but my hunger vanished simply at the sound of the alarm. Nothing happened, and 3/4 of an hour later it was all clear. The dishes were stacked ready to be done. Air raid warning, ack fire, an awful lot of planes. Oh dear me, twice in one day, that's too much, we all thought, but that didn't help at all. Once again the bombs rained down. The other side this time, on Schiphol, according to the British. The planes dived and climbed. We heard the hum of their engines, and it was very gruesome. Each moment I thought, one's falling here, now, here it comes. I can assure you that when I went to bed at 9 o'clock, I couldn't hold my legs still. I woke up at the stroke of 12 planes. Dussel was undressing. I didn't let that put me off, and at the first shot, I leaped out of bed wide awake. 2 hours with Daddy, and still they kept coming. Then they ceased firing, and I was able to go to bed. I fell asleep at 2:30. 7 o'clock. I sat up in bed with a start. Mr. Von Don was with Daddy. Burglars were my first thought. I heard Mr. Von Don say everything. I thought that everything had been stolen, but no, this time it was wonderful news, such as we have not heard for months, perhaps in all the war years. Mussolini has resigned. The King of Italy has taken over the government. We jumped for joy. After the terrible day yesterday, at last, something good again, and hope. Hope for it to end. Hope for peace. Kraler called in and told us that the Fokkers had been badly damaged. Meanwhile, we had another air raid alarm with planes overhead and one more warning siren. I'm just about choked with alarms, very tired, and don't feel a bit like work. But now the suspense over Italy will awaken the hope that it will soon end, perhaps even this year. Yours, Anne. Thursday, 29 July, 1943. Dear Kitty, Mrs. Von Don, Dussel, and I were doing the dishes, and I was extraordinarily quiet, which hardly ever happens, so they would have been sure to notice. In order to avoid questions, I quickly sought a fairly neutral topic, and thought that the book, Carrie from the Other Side, would meet the need. But I had made a mistake. If Mrs. Von Don doesn't pounce on me, then Mr. Dussel does. This was what it came to. Mr. Dussel has specially recommended this book as being excellent. Margot and I thought it was anything but excellent. The boy's character was certainly well drawn, but the rest I had better gloss over that. I said something to that effect while we were washing the dishes, but that brought me a packet of trouble. How can you understand the psychology of a man? Of a child is not so difficult. You are much too young for a book like that. Why, even a man of 20 would not be able to grasp it. Why did he so especially recommend this book to Margot and me? Now Dussel and Mrs. Von Don continued together. You know too much about things that are unsuitable for you. You've been brought up all wrong. Later on, when you're older, you won't enjoy anything. Then you'll say, I read that in books 20 years ago. You'd better make haste if you want to get a husband or fall in love, or everything is sure to be a disappointment to you. You're already proficient in the theory. It's only the practice that you still lack. I suppose it's their idea of a good upbringing to always try to set me against my parents, because that is what they often do. And to tell a girl of my age nothing about grown-up subjects is an equally fine method. I see the results of that kind of upbringing frequently and all too clearly. I could have slapped both of their faces at that moment as they stood there making a fool of me. I was beside myself with rage, and I'm just counting the days until I'm rid of those people. Mrs. Von Don is a nice one. She sets a fine example. She certainly sets one, a bad one. She is well known as being very pushing, selfish, cunning, calculating, and is never content. I can also add vanity and coquetry to the list. There is no question about it. She is an unspeakably disagreeable person. I could write whole chapters about Madame, and who knows, perhaps I will someday. Anyone can put on a fine coat of varnish outside. Mrs. Von Don is friendly to strangers and especially men, so it's easy to make a mistake when you have only known her for a short time. Mummy thinks she is too stupid to waste words over, Margot too unimportant, Pam too ugly, literally and figuratively, and I, after long observation, for I was never prejudiced from the start, have come to the conclusion that she is all three and a lot more. She has so many bad qualities. Why should I even begin about one of them? Yours, Anne. P.S. Will the reader take into consideration that when this story was written, the writer had not cooled down from her fury? Tuesday, 3 August 1943. Dear Kitty, political news excellent. In Italy, the fascist party has been banned. The people are fighting the fascists in many places. Even the army is actually taking part in the battle. Can a country like that wage war against England? We've just had a third air raid. I clenched my teeth together to make myself feel courageous. Mrs. Von Don, who has always said, a terrible end is better than no end at all, is the greatest coward of us all now. She was shaking like a leaf this morning and even burst into tears. When her husband, with whom she has just made it up after a week's squabbling, comforted her, the expression on her face alone almost made me feel sentimental. Mushi has proved that keeping cats has disadvantages as well as advantages. The whole house is full of fleas, and the plague gets worse every day. Mr. Koophuis has scattered yellow powder in every nook and corner, but the fleas don't seem to mind a bit. It's making us all quite nervous. One keeps imagining an itch in one's arm, legs, and various parts of the body, which is why quite a lot of us are doing gymnastics, so as to be able to look at the back of our necks or legs while standing up. Now we're being paid back for not being more supple. We're too stiff to even turn our heads properly. We gave up real gymnastics long ago. Yours, Anne. Wednesday, 4 August 1943. We're on page 95. Dear Kitty, now that we have been in the secret annex for over a year, you know something of our lives, but some of it is quite indescribable. There is so much to tell. Everything is so different from ordinary times and from ordinary people's lives. But still, to give you a closer look into our lives, now and again, I intend to give you a description of an ordinary day. Today, I'm beginning with the evening and night. 9 o'clock in the evening. The bustle of going to bed in the secret annex begins, and it is always really quite a business. Chairs are shoved about, beds are pulled down, blankets unfolded, nothing remains where it is during the day. I sleep on the little divan, which is not more than 1.5 meters long, so chairs have to be used to lengthen it. A quilt, sheets, pillows, blankets are all fetched from Dussel's bed, where they remain during the day. One hears terrible creaking in the next room, Margot's concertina bed being pulled out. Again, divan, blankets, and pillows. Everything is done to make the wooden slats a bit more comfortable. Sounds like thunder above, but is only Mrs. Von Don's bed. This is shifted to the window, you see, in order to give Her Majesty in the pink bed jacket fresh air to tickle her dainty nostrils. After Peter's finished, I step into the washing cubicle where I give myself a thorough wash and general toilet. It occasionally happens, only in the hot weeks or months, that there is a tiny flea floating in the water. Then teeth cleaning, hair curling, manicure, and my cotton wool pads with hydrogen peroxide to bleach black mustache hairs. All this in under half an hour. 9:30. Quickly into dressing gown, soap in one hand, potty, hairpins, pants, curlers and cotton wool in the other. I hurry out of the bathroom, but usually I'm called back once for the various hairs which decorate the wash basin in graceful curves, but which are not approved of by the next person. 10 o'clock. Put up the blackout. Good night. For at least a quarter of an hour there is creaking of beds and a sighing of broken springs. Then all is quiet. At least that is, if our neighbors upstairs don't quarrel in bed. 11:30. The bathroom door creaks. A narrow strip of light falls into the room. A squeak of shoes, a large coat, even larger than the man made inside it. Dussel returns from his night work in Kraler's office, shuffling on the floor for 10 minutes. Crackle of paper, that is the food which has to be stowed away, and a bed is made. Then the form disappears again, and one only hears suspicious noises from the lavatory from time to time. 3 o'clock. I have to get up for a little job in the metal pot under my bed, which is on a rubber mat for safety's sake in case of leakage. When this has to take place, I always hold my breath as it clatters into the tin like a brook from a mountain. Then the pot is returned to its place, and the figure in the white nightgown, which evokes the same cry from Margot every evening, "Oh, that indecent night dress," steps back into bed. Then a certain person lies awake for about a quarter of an hour, listening to the sounds of the night. Firstly, to whether there might not be a burglar downstairs, then to the various beds above, next door, and to in my room, from which one is usually able to make out how the various members of the household are sleeping, or how they pass the night in wakefulness. The latter is certainly not pleasant, especially when it concerns a member of the family by the name of Dussel. First, I hear a sound like a fish gasping for breath. This is repeated 9 or 10 times. Then, with much ado and interchanged with little smacking sounds, the lips are moistened, followed by a lengthy twisting and turning in bed with rearranging of pillows. 5 minutes, perfect peace, and then the same sequence of events unfolds itself at least 3 times more, after the doctor has soothed himself to sleep again for a little while. It can also happen that we get a bit of shooting in the night, varying between 1 o'clock and 4. I never really realize it until, from habit, I am already standing at my bedside. Sometimes I'm so busy dreaming that I'm thinking about French irregular verbs or a quarrel upstairs. It is some time before I begin to realize that guns are firing and that I am still in the room. But it usually happens as described above. I quickly grab a pillow and handkerchief, put on my dressing gown and slippers, and scamper to Daddy like Margot wrote in this birthday poem. The first shot sounds at dead of night. Hush, look, a door creaks open wide. A little girl glides into sight, clasping a pillow to her side. Once landed in the big bed, the worst is over, except if the firing gets very bad. 6:45. Turr, the alarm clock that raises its voice at any hour of the day, if one asks for it, and sometimes when one doesn't. Crack, ping, Mrs. Von Don has turned it off. Creak, Mr. Von Don gets up, puts on water, and then full speed to the bathroom. 7:15. The door creaks again. Dussel can go to the bathroom. Once alone, I take down the blackout, and a new day in the secret annex has begun. Yours, Anne. Thursday, 5 August 1943. Dear Kitty, today I'm going to take lunchtime. It is 12:30. The whole mixed crowd breathes again. The warehouse boys have gone home now. Above, one can hear the noise of Mrs. Von Don's vacuum cleaner on her beautiful and only carpet. Margot goes with a few books under her arm for her Dutch lesson for children who make no progress, because that's Dussel's attitude. Pim goes into a corner with his inseparable Dickens to try and find peace somewhere. Mummy hurries upstairs to help the industrious housewife, and I go to the bathroom to tidy it up a bit, and myself at the same time. 1:45. The place is filling up. First, Mr. Von Santen, then Kufeis or Kraler, Ellie said, and sometimes Miep as well. 1 o'clock. We're all still sitting listening to the BBC, seated around the baby wireless. These are the only times when the members of the secret annex do not interrupt each other, because now someone is speaking whom even Mr. Von Don can't interrupt. 1:15. The great share out. Everyone from below gets a cup of soup, and if there is ever a pudding, some of that as well. Mr. Van Santen is happy and goes to sit on the divan or lean against the writing table. Newspaper cup and usually the cat beside him. If one of the three is missing, he's sure to protest. Kufeis tells us the latest news from town. He is certainly an excellent source of information. Kraler comes helter-skelter upstairs, a short, firm knock on the door, and in he comes, rubbing his hands according to his mood, in a good temper and talkative, or bad-tempered and quiet. 1:45. Everyone rises from the table and goes about his own business. Margot and Mummy to the dishes. Mr. and Mrs. Von Don to their divan. Peter up to the attic, Daddy to the divan downstairs, Dussel to his bed, and Anne to her work. Then follows the most peaceful hour. Everyone is asleep. No one is disturbed. Dussel dreams of lovely food. The expression on his face gives this away. But I don't look long because the time goes so fast. And at 4 o'clock, the pedantic doctor is standing, the clock in hand, because I'm 1 minute late in clearing the table for him. Yours, Anne. Monday, 9 August, 1943. We're on page 100. Dear Kitty, to continue the secret annex daily timetable, I shall now describe the evening meal. Mr. Von Don begins. He is first to be served, takes a lot of everything if it is what he likes, usually talks at the same time, always gives his opinion as the only one worth listening to, and once he has spoken, it is irrevocable. Because if anyone dares to question it, then he flares up at once. Oh, he can spit like a cat. I'd rather not argue, I can tell you. If you've once tried, you don't try again. He has the best opinion. He knows the most about everything. All right then, he has got brains, but self-satisfaction has reached a high grade with this gentleman. Madam, really I should remain silent. Some days, especially if there is a bad mood coming on, you can't look at her face. On closer examination, she is the guilty one in all the arguments. Not the subject. Oh no, everyone prefers to remain aloof over that. But one could perhaps call her the kindler. Stirring up trouble, that's fun. Mrs. Frank against Anne. Margot against Daddy doesn't go quite so easily. But now at table, Mrs. Von Don doesn't go short, although she thinks so at times. The tiniest potatoes, the sweetest mouthful, the best of everything picking over is her system. The others will get their turn as long as I have the best. Then talking, whether anyone is interested, whether they are listening or not, that doesn't seem to matter. I suppose she thinks everyone is interested in what Mrs. Von Don says. Coquettish smiles, behaving as if one knew everything, giving everyone a bit of advice and encouragement. That's sure to make a good impression. But if you look longer, then the good soon wears off. Oh, she is industrious. 2, gay. 3, a coquette, and occasionally pretty. This is Petronella Von Don. The third table companion, one doesn't hear much from him. Young Mr. Von Don is very quiet and doesn't draw much attention to himself. As for appetite, a Danaidean vessel which is never full, and all after the heaviest meal declares quite calmly that he could have eaten double. Number 4, Margot, eats like a little mouse and doesn't talk at all. The only thing that go down are vegetables and fruit. Spoiled is the Von Don's judgment. Not enough fresh air and games, our opinion. Beside her, Mummy, good appetite, very talkative. No one has the impression as Mrs. Von Don. This is the housewife. What is the difference? Well, Mrs. Von Don does the cooking and Mummy washes up and polishes. Number 6 and 7, I won't say much about Daddy and me. The former is the most unassuming of all at the table. He looks first to see if everyone else has something. He needs nothing himself, for the best things are for the children. He is the perfect example, and sitting beside him, the secret annex's bundle of nerves. Dr. Dussel helps himself, never looks up, eats, and doesn't talk. And if one must talk, then for heaven's sakes, let it be about food. You don't quarrel about it, you only brag. Enormous helpings go down, and the word no is never heard. Never when the food is good, and not often when it's bad. Trousers wrapping his chest, red coat, black bedroom slippers, and horn-rimmed spectacles. That is how one sees him at the little table, always working, alternated only by his afternoon nap, food, and his favorite spot, the lavatory. 3, 4, 5 times a day, someone stands impatiently in front of the door and wriggles, hopping from one foot to the other, hardly able to contain himself. Does it disturb him? Not a bit. From 7:15 till half past, all 12:30 till 1 o'clock. From 2 till 15:15, from hour till quarter, from 4 till 15:15, from 6 till 15:15, and from 11:30 until 12. One can make a note of it. These are the regular sitting times. He won't come off or pay any heed to an imploring voice at the door, giving warning of approaching disaster. Number 9 isn't a member of the secret annex family, but rather a companion in the house and at table. Ellie has a healthy appetite, leaves nothing on her plate, and is not picky and choosy. She is easy to please, and that is just what gives us pleasure. Cheerful and good-natured, good-tempered, willing and good-natured, these are her characteristics. Yours, Anne. Tuesday, 10 August 1943. Dear Kitty, new idea. I talk more to myself than to the others at mealtimes, which is to be recommended for 2 reasons. Firstly, because everyone is happy if I don't chatter the whole time, and secondly, I needn't get annoyed about other people's opinions. I don't think my opinions are stupid and the others do, so it is better to keep them to myself. I do just the same if I have to eat something that I simply can't stand. I put my plate in front of me, pretend that is something delicious, look at it as little as possible. Before I know where I am, it is gone. When I get up in the morning, also a very unpleasant process, I jump out of bed thinking to myself, you'll be back in a second. Go to the window, take down the blackout, sniff at the crack of the window until I feel a good bit of fresh air and I'm awake. The bed is turned down as quickly as possible, and then the temptation is removed. Do you know what Mummy calls this sort of thing? The art of living. That's an odd expression. For the last week, we've all been in a bit of a muddle about time because our dear and beloved Vestertorn clock bell has apparently been taken away for war purposes, so that neither by day nor night do we ever know the exact time. I still have some hope that they will think up a substitute, tin, copper, or some other thing, to remind the neighborhood of the clock. Whether I'm upstairs or down, or wherever I am, my feet are the admiration of all, glittering in a pair of, for these days, exceptionally fine shoes. Meat managed to get hold of them secondhand for 27.50 florins. Wine-colored suede leather with fairly high wedge heels. I feel as if I'm on stilts and look much taller than I am. Dussel has indirectly endangered our lives. He actually let Miep bring a forbidden book for him, one which abuses Mussolini and Hitler. On the way, she happened to be run into by an SS car. She lost her temper, shouted, "Miserable wretches," and rode on. It is better not to think of what might have happened if she had had to go to their headquarters. Yours, Anne. Wednesday, 18 August 1943. Dear Kitty, the title for this piece is The Communal Task of the Day, Potato Peeling. One person fetches the newspapers, another the knives, keeping the best for himself, of course, a third potatoes, and the fourth a pan of water. Mr. Dussel begins, does not always scrape well, but scrapes incessantly, glancing right and left. Does everyone do it the way he does? No. And look here. I take the knife in my hand like this, scrape from the top downwards. No, not like that, like this. I get on better like this, Mr. Dussel, I remarked timidly. But still, this is the best way. But du canst take D's from me. Naturally, I don't care a bit. Aber du must know for yourself. We scrape on. I look slyly once in my neighbor's direction. He shakes his head thoughtfully once more. Over me, I suppose, but is silent. I scrape on again. Now I look to the other side, where Daddy is sitting. For him, scraping potatoes is not just a little odd job, but a piece of precision work. When he reads, he has a deep wrinkle at the back of his head. But if he helps prepare potatoes, beans, or any other vegetables, then it seems as if nothing else penetrates. Then he has on his potato face, and he would never hand over an imperfectly scraped potato. It's out of the question when he makes that face. I work on again and then just look up for a second. I know it already. Mrs. Von Don is trying to attract Dussel's attention. First she looks in his direction and Dussel appears not to notice anything. Then she winks an eye. Dussel works on. Then she laughs. Dussel doesn't look up. Then Mummy laughs too. Dussel takes no notice. Mrs. Von Don has not achieved anything, so she has to think of something else. A pause, and then, Putty, do put on an apron. Tomorrow I shall have to get all the spots out of your suit. I'm not getting myself dirty. Another moment silent. Putty, why don't you sit down? I'm comfortable standing up and prefer it. Pause. Putty, look. Du spats shown. You're making a mess. Yes, Mammy, I'm being careful. Mrs. Von Don searches for another subject. I say, Putty, why aren't there any English air raids now? Because the weather is bad, Curly. But it was lovely yesterday, and they didn't fly then, either. Let's not talk about it. Why, surely one can talk about it or give one's opinion. No, why ever not? Do be quiet, Mamachin. Mr. Frank always answers his wife, doesn't he? Mr. Von Don wrestles with himself. This is his tender spot. It's something he can't take, and Mrs. Von Don begins again. The invasion seems as if it will never come. Mr. Von Don goes white. When Mrs. Von Don sees this, she turns red, but goes on again. The British do nothing. The bomb explodes. And now hold your tongue. Mummy can hardly hold back her laughter. I look straight in front of me. This sort of thing happens nearly every day unless they have just had a very bad quarrel, because then they both keep their mouths shut. I have to go up to the attic to fetch some potatoes. Peter is busy there delousing the cat. He looks up, the cat notices, pop, he has disappeared through the open window into the gutter. Peter swears, I laugh and disappear. Yours, Anne. And that's our reading for today. There is a writing assignment, so make sure you complete that. and you are done then. Have a good day.